When I pulled open the door to my sewing studio that morning, the acrid smell of smoke hit me like a slap from the past, curling into my nostrils and twisting my gut into knots. There, in the center of the room, lay the charred remains of my wedding dress, one I'd spent months restoring for our vow renewal. Ashes dusted the floor like forgotten confetti, and a single note fluttered beside it. "You don't deserve to shine." My hands trembled as I picked it up, the paper crisp and mocking in the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. I stood there, frozen, the world narrowing to that pile of ruin. This dress wasn't just fabric. It was 25 years of marriage, stitched together with Memorisar, first dance under string lights. The way my husband Tom's eyes had lit up when he saw me walk down the aisle. I'd been altering it in secret, adding delicate lace from my mother's veil, dreaming of surprising him at the ceremony next week. Now, it was gone, reduced to blackened threads that crumbled at my touch. Who could have done this? The studio door had been locked, or so I thought. My mind raced, but my body wouldn't move. I sank to the floor, the cool tile pressing against my knees, and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Tears blurred the notes' sharp letters, but the words burned clear in my mind. It was a Friday in Austin, the kind where the Texas sun sneaks through the blinds like an old friend, warming the cluttered tables of my little shop on South Congress Avenue. I'm Laura, 55 now, with hands calloused from years of pinning hems and threading needles. My life has always been about creating beauty from scrap-turning old gowns into new dreams for brides who walk through my door. The trendy art scene here buzzes around me. Galleries with vibrant murals, coffee shops where young artists sketch over lattes, and that outdoor venue by the river where Tom and I planned to renew our vows. It's a place of renewal, fitting for us after all these years. But that morning, as I swept up the ashes with a broom that felt too heavy in my grip, empathy for myself washed over me like a wave. I'd built this life stitch by stitch, and someone had tried to unravel it. I didn't scream or rage. That's not my way. Instead, I whispered a quiet prayer, the kind my grandmother taught me, and tucked the note into my apron pocket. Little did I know, this was just the spark of a fire that had been smoldering for years. Before all this, my days flowed like the Colorado River, steady, predictable, laced with the quiet joys of a life well lived. Tom and I met in our 20s, right here in Austin, when he was a budding architect and I was apprenticing at a bridal boutique. He proposed on a whim during a picnic by Barton Springs, his voice nervous but steady as he slipped a simple band onto my finger. We built a home in a cozy bungalow on the east side, filled it with 2 kids no grown and off chasing their own dream sand, turned my passion for sewing into a thriving studio. Mornings started with the percolator bubbling in our kitchen, the rich aroma of coffee mingling with the faint scent of Tom's aftershave as he kissed my cheek before heading to his firm. "Another day of making magic, love," he'd say, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I'd nod, smiling, and wave him off from the porch, where wildflowers nodded in the breeze. Afternoons were for the studio, bolts of silk whispering as I unrolled them, the rhythmic whir of my sewing machine like a heartbeat. Brides came in wide-eyed, sharing stories of their loves while I measured and pinned, offering advice like a favorite aunt. "Marriage is like this hem," I'd tell them softly. "It needs care to hold strong." Our family extended beyond blood. Tom's brother, Mark, lived nearby with his wife, Diane, my sister-in-law, for over 2 decades. Diane and I weren't close like sisters, but we shared holidays and barbecues. her sharp laugh cutting through the chatter. She worked as a real estate agent, always impeccably dressed, with a knack for closing deals that made her the family's success story. Mark adored her, and Tom often joked that she kept us all on our toes. Our kids called her Aunt Dee, and she'd spoil them with gifts from her travels. On the surface, it was harmonious kind of family where Sunday dinners involved homemade brisket and stories around the table. The clink of glasses, toasting small victories, yet, looking back, there were undercurrents I chose to ignore. Diane's compliments sometimes carried an edge. Like when she'd eye my latest dress design and say, "Oh Laura, that's so, quaint. In this market, bold sells better." I'd brush it off, attributing it to her competitive nature. Tom and I had our routines. Evening walks along Lady Bird Lake, where the water lapped gently and we'd hold hands in comfortable silence, reflecting on the years. Our vow renewal was my idea, quiet celebration of endurance after Tom's health scare last year. A mild heart episode that reminded us life was fragile. I'd been working on the dress in stolen moments, envisioning the romantic outdoor venue with fairy lights twinkling like stars. Our closest friends and family gathered. It was meant to be a beacon of our love, not ashes on the floor. As I finished cleaning that day, the studio felt emptier, the mannequins staring like silent witnesses. I called Tom, my voice steady, despite the tremor in my chest. "Something happened at the shop," I said, hearing the concern in his pause. He rushed over, his truck pulling up with a familiar rumble, and wrapped me in his arms. "We'll figure this out," he murmured into my hair, his embrace warm and solid. But as we sifted through the remnants, a keychain caught my eye amid the debridans, with the little silver house charm she always carried. My heart skipped. No, it couldn't be. I slipped it into my pocket without a word, the metal cool against my palm. Doubt crept in like shadows at dusk, but I pushed it away. Families have misunderstandings, I told myself. This had to be one. The weekend passed in a haze. Tom and I attended a local art fair, the trendy scene alive, with street musicians strumming guitars and vendors hawking handmade jewelry. The air smelled of street tacos and fresh paint from nearby murals. Diane was there with Mark, her smile bright as she hugged me. "Hello. Laura, you look tired. Everything okay?" she asked, her hand lingering on my arm a beat too long. I nodded, forcing a smile, but her eyes seemed to search mine. That night, as Tom snored softly beside me, I lay awake, the note's words echoing. Why would anyone think I didn't deserve to shine? My mind wandered to old conversations, Diane's subtle digs about my simple life compared to her glamorous one. Jealousy. It seemed absurd. But the keychain nagged at me, a small clue in a puzzle I didn't want to solve by Monday. Suspicion had taken root. I returned to the studio early, the bell jingling like a warning as I entered. The space felt violated, my sanctuary tainted. As I sorted through orders, a young bride named Mia came in for a fitting, her excitement palpable. "I can't wait to walk down the aisle," she gushed, twirling in the mirror. Her joy stirred something in me, resolved to reclaim mine. But when I reached for a bolt of fabric, I noticed a drawer slightly ajar, one where I kept personal sketches. Inside, a few designs were missing. Nothing crucial, but enough to unsettle. Who had been here? I thought of Diane borrowing my spare key, months ago, for a quick errand. She'd returned it, hadn't she? The doubt grew, a quiet whisper turning to a murmur. That afternoon, I decided to test the waters. I invited Diane over for coffee on Tuesday, the kind of casual drop-by we'd done 100 times. The studio smelled of lavender sachets and fresh-cut peonies I'd arranged to lift my spirits. I set 2 mugs on the small table by the window, the steam curling like question marks. When she arrived, her heels clicked across the hardwood, sharp and sure. She wore a cream blazer that cost more than my monthly electric bill. Her perfume, a cloud of jasmine that followed her like an entourage. "Laura, darling," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. "You sounded mysterious on the phone. Everything all right?" I smiled, the way you do when your stomach is nodding itself. Just needed a friendly ear. "Sit." We talked about nothing first. Her latest listing, a mid-century modern on the lake. The way the market was eating people alive. I nodded, letting her voice fill the room, watching the way her fingers toyed with the handle of her mug. When the small talk thinned, I slid the keychain across the table. The silver house glinted between us like a tiny accusation. Diane's eyes flicked down, then up. A blink, a half-laugh. "Oops. Must have dropped it when I borrowed your restroom last week." "Last week," I repeated, soft. "Funny. I haven't seen you here since the art fair." Her smile stayed, but something behind it shifted like a curtain moving when there's no wind. "Memories fuzzy, I guess. You know how busy I am." I let the silence stretch, the kind that makes people feel it. She did. "Honestly, Laura, I worry about you. All this, fabric and thread. You could be doing so much more. Tom deserves a wife who," she stopped, caught herself, then shrugged. "Never mind." I leaned in, voice low. "Finish the sentence, Diane." She sipped her coffee, buying time. "He deserves someone who shines on his arm at those architect galas. Someone who doesn't smell like mothballs and starch." The words landed like pins in a pincushion, precise, meant to prick. I felt the sting, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached into my apron pocket and unfolded the note. I placed it beside the keychain. Diane's face went very still. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving the coral lipstick to bright. "You don't deserve to shine," I read aloud, calm as Sunday morning. "That's what you think of me." She opened her mouth, closed it. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about." But her voice cracked on the last word. "A hairline fracture." I stood, walked to the back room, and returned with the fire-safe box where I kept backups of everything, photos, patterns, and now, the scorched lace fragment I'd salvaged. I laid it on the table like evidence in a quiet trial. Diane stared at the blackened threads. Her breathing changed, shallow and quick. "Laura, why?" I asked, not angry, just tired. After 25 years of Thanksgivings and birthdays and watching our kids grow up together, why? She looked away, out the window where a food truck idled, its salsa music faint. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. "You get everything without trying. Tom looks at you like you hung the moon. Mark. He looks at listings. And your little shop people talk about your dresses like they're art. I sell houses. Laura houses. And no one remembers my name 5 minutes later." Jealousy, then. Not the cartoon kind, but the slow-eating sort that festers in the dark. I felt a pang not for her, but for the years I'd missed the rot. "That doesn't explain arson," I said, her eyes snapped back to mine. "It was an accident. I came to return the key, saw the dress on the mannequin. I don't know. I had a lighter in my hand from the patio heater at home. One flick. I thought it would just singe the hem. Teach you to... I don't know. Dim a little?" She laughed, bitter. It went up like paper. I closed my eyes. The image of her standing over my life's work, watching it burn, lodged behind my lids. When I opened them, she was crying silent tears that didn't smudge her mascara. I recorded this, I said, tapping my phone on the table. The red dot had been blinking the whole time. I needed to hear it from you. Diane's face crumpled. Laura, please. Mark can't know. The kids Mark will know, I said. And Tom. And everyone at the renewal. Because I'm done protecting secrets that hurt people. She stood so fast, the chair scraped. You'll ruin us. No, I said, gathering the lace fragment, the note, the key. You did that the moment you struck the match. She left without another word, the bell above the door jingling like a warning shot. I locked it behind her, leaned my forehead against the cool glass, and let the tears come. Not for the dress I could remake fabric. For the sister I thought I had. That night, Tom came home early. I met him in the kitchen, where the scent of garlic and rosemary usually welcomed him. Instead, I handed him the phone. He listened to the recording in silence, his jaw tightening with every word. When it ended, he set the phone down like it might explode. She's family, he said. Voice rough. She stopped being family when she tried to erase ours. He pulled me close. His shirt smelling of sawdust from the job site. We stood like that until the pasta water boiled over, hissing on the stove. The next day's blurred. I didn't sleep. I sketched new designs at 3 a.m., the pencil scratching loud in the quiet house. I met with the venue coordinator, confirmed the riverside setup, lanterns, wildflowers, the arch Tom had built himself. I told no one the plan forming in my head, not even my best friend, Carla, who ran the gallery next door. But I needed proof, beyond the recording, something undeniable. So I did what any seamstress does when threads are tangled. I followed the pattern. Diane's office was 10 minutes away, all glass and chrome. I went during lunch, wearing the plain gray dress I saved for errands, blending into the bustle. Her assistant was out. The desk drawer was unlocked. Diane always did trust too much in appearances. Inside, a folder labeled Renewal. My breath caught photos, dozens of them Tom and me at last year's Christmas party. My vow renewal Pinterest board printed out, red circles around the dress. Emails to a local gossip blog. Anonymous source says, Laura's marriage is a sham vow renewal, just a desperate grab for attention. A draft text to Tom. She's hiding something. Ask about the late nights. None sent, but the intent was a blade. And at the bottom, a lighter. The same silver flip-top she'd used on my dress, monogrammed with her initials. I took photos with my phone, hands steady now, evidence. I left before she returned. The lighter's weight burning a hole in my conscience. Theft, maybe. But justice has its own hemline. Friday, I called Mark. He answered on the second ring, cheerful as ever. Hey sis. What's up? Can you come to the studio? Alone. He arrived in 20 minutes, tie askew, worry in his eyes. I played the recording. Showed him the folder, the lighter. He aged 10 years in 10 minutes. She's been off, he admitted, rubbing his neck. Spending more, snapping at the kids. I thought it was stress. It's envy, I said gently. And it almost cost me my marriage. Mark's shoulders sagged. What do you need from me? Your presence at the ceremony. And your honesty when the time comes. He nodded, eyes wet. I'm sorry, Laura, for all of it. I hugged him, my brother-in-law, not my enemy. We'll get through this. Families do. The night before the renewal, I finished the new dress. Not a replica, something bolder. I'd taken the scorched lace, washed it until the char lifted, and appliqued it onto ivory silk like phoenix feathers. The back dipped low, held by tiny pearl buttons I'd sewn while listening to Nina Simone. When I tried it on, it fit like forgiveness. Tom found me in the studio mirror. "You're breathtaking," he whispered, arms around my waist. "It's not the dress," I said. "It's what we've stitched back together." He kissed my neck, right where the lace met skin. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm proud of you." I believed him. The morning of the ceremony dawned golden, the river sparkling like it knew secrets. Guests arrived in sundresses and linen suits, the air humming with cicadas and laughter. Carla had strung Edison bulbs through the trees. The arch overflowed with sunflowers and baby's breath. Our kids flew in, our daughter from Denver, our son from Seattle, hugging me like I might vanish. Diane and Mark were last. She wore navy, severe and elegant, her smile a mask. Mark's eyes were red-rimmed. Tom greeted them with a nod, nothing more. The officiant began. Vows, simple and true. When it was my turn, I stepped forward, the grass cool beneath my bare feet. I'd asked for a moment to speak. The crowd hushed. 25 years ago, I started, voice carrying on the breeze. I promised to love this man, in good times and bad. I didn't know bad would wear a familiar face. Gasps rippled. Phones lowered. Diane went rigid. I held up my phone. "Some of you heard rumors. Let me play the truth." Diane's confession filled the air, her voice tinny through the speaker, every word a pin dropping. When it ended, silence thicker than humidity. Then I turned to her. "You wanted me dimmed. But light shared only grows." Mark stepped beside her, hand on her elbow. It's time." She looked at him, then at me, tears finally ruining the mascara. "I'm sorry," she whispered, loud enough for the front row. I nodded. Not absolution, accountability. The ceremony continued. Rings exchanged. Kiss under the arch. Applause like summer rain. After, Diane approached, alone. "I'll pay for the dress. Therapy, whatever you need. Start with the truth," I said. "Every day. And maybe one day, coffee again." She walked away, Mark guiding her to the car. The reception was Joy barbecue and Shinerbach, kids dancing with their dad. I slipped away to the riverbank, dress trailing in the current. Carla found me. "You okay?" I smiled, real this time. "I'm shining." The sun dipped low, behind the oaks, painting the river in molten copper. Laughter floated from the receptioner's son, twirling his little niece. Tom's deep chuckle rising above the fiddle player's reel. I stayed on the bank a moment longer, the hem of my new dress, damp from the water. The scorched lace, catching the light like battle scars, turned beautiful. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Carla. "They're asking for the bride." I smiled, slipped it away, and walked back through the grass. Fireflies blinking awake around me. The next weeks unfolded like a quilt pieced from both shadow and sunrise. Diane and Mark didn't vanish fumly. Doesn't work that webbit. The air between us shifted. Mark called the morning after the ceremony, voice hoarse from crying. "She's seeing someone, Laura, a counselor. She wants to make amends." I listened, stirring oatmeal on the stove, the wooden spoon circling slow. "Amends start with action, Mark. Not just words." He agreed. And I heard the clink of his coffee mug. The same sound our mother used to make when she was thinking hard. Diane herself showed up at the studio on a Thursday. Rain tapping the tin roof like impatient fingers. She carried a paper bag from my favorite baker Icalaches, still warm, apricot filling bleeding through the wax paper. Her hair was pulled back plain, no makeup, eyes puffy. She looked smaller without the armor of lipstick and heels. "I brought breakfast," she said, setting the bag on the cutting table. "And this?" She slid an envelope across the wood. Inside, a check for $5,000 made out to the local bridal charity I'd quietly started donating scraps to. "For the dress. And the designs you lost." Her voice cracked on lost. "I sold the lake listing. Took the commission. I didn't touch the check." "Money doesn't stitch trust, Diane. I know." She swallowed. "I start group therapy next week. For envy, control, whatever this is." She gestured vaguely at herself, then at the studio. "I hated that you made beauty look easy. That Tom still chooses you every morning. I wanted to take something you couldn't replace." I studied hearth tremor in her lower lip, the way her hands worried the hem of her sweater. "You almost did," I said softly. "But you taught me something. Beauty isn't the dress. It's the choice to keep sewing after the fire." She nodded, tears slipping. "May I watch you work? Just today. No talking unless you want." I hesitated, then pulled a stool from the corner. "Thread the bobbin. We'll start there." We worked in silence for an hour, her winding the ivory thread with careful fingers. Me pinning a bodice for a bride who'd lost her mother and wanted pieces of her mom's veil woven in. The rain eased to a drizzle. The studio smelled of starch and yeast from the kolaches we finally shared. When Diane left, she paused at the door. "Thank you, Laura. Not for the check, not for the pastry, for the space to begin." Tom and I talked late into nights, windows open to the chirp of crickets. He admitted he'd noticed Diane's barbs over the years but chalked it up to her personality. "I should have protected you better," he said, tracing the worry lines beside my eyes. I kissed his knuckles, rough from years of drafting tables. "We protect each other now." That's the vow we renewed. The charity grew. Brides brought gowns their grandmothers wore in the 50s, yellowed but treasured. I taught a Saturday class in the studio's back room, young mistresses, some still in high school, learning to alter, to mend, to create. Mia, the bride who'd twirled in my mirror the week of the fire, became my first apprentice. She had a steady hand and a laugh like wind chimes. "Miss Laura," she said one afternoon, "you ever think of showing your Phoenix dress? The one with the burn marks?" I hadn't, but the idea took root. Carla, ever the gallery maven, offered wall space in her South Congress shop. We hung the dress under soft spotlights, the scorched lace glowing like embers against the ivory silk. Beside it, a plaque from Ash's Beauty. Opening night brought a crowd, artists in bold prints, brides-to-be, clutching tissues, even the gossip blogger who'd received Diane's unsent emails. She approached, sheepish. "I deleted everything. And I'm sorry." I accepted her apology with a nod. Grace is a thread that binds both ways. Diane came too, standing at the back in a simple black dress. When our eyes met, she lifted a small wave, then slipped out before the speeches. Progress, not perfection, summer deepened. Tom and I took a long weekend at a cabin in the hill countryside. Our walls, a porch swing, no cell service. We read on the dock, feet in the water, the silence between us comfortable as old jeans. One evening, fireflies danced above the lake, and he said, I fall in love with you a little more every time you choose kindness over bitterness. I leaned my head on his shoulder. And I fall harder every time you see Morelli see me. Back in Austin, the studio hummed. Orders poured inward of the Phoenix dress spread like wildfire in reverse. A local magazine ran a feature. Seamstress turns betrayal into bridal hope. Young designers asked to collaborate. I mentored 3 apprentices now, their laughter filling the space where smoke once lingered. Mia designed her first original gown, a teal-ink stunner with pockets, and cried when the bride accepted it. One October morning, crisp enough for cardigans, Mark stopped by with coffee. "Diane's moving," he said, handing me a cup. "Not far, just a smaller house. She's selling the big one. Says she doesn't need the show anymore." He paused. "She asked if she could bring the kids by sometime. Let them see what real work looks like." I smiled. Anytime. Healing wasn't linear. Some nights, I still woke, smelling phantom smoke, heart racing. Tom would pull me close, whisper, "It's over, love. We're here," and I'd drift back, anchored by his breathing. The charity held its first gala in November. An old warehouse turned wonderland with twinkle lights and donated gowns on mannequins like silent debuts. I wore the Phoenix dress again, the lace softer now, from wear. During my speech, I looked out at 200 face brides who'd lost deposits to shady vendors. Mothers sewing for daughters on tight budgets. Apprentices beaming in the front row. "I used to think a wedding dress was about one day," I said, voice steady. "But it's about every day after. The fights you mend. The fires you walk through. The love you keep stitching, even when the pattern changes." Applause rose like a tide. Afterward, a girl, no older than 16, approached, clutching a plastic bag with a torn prom dress inside. "Can you fix it?" she asked. "My mom says it's ruined." I knelt, examined the rip. "Nothing's ruined that can't be remade." I took her hand. "Come Tuesday. We'll start with tea and a thimble." Winter settled in, mild and bright. Tom and I hosted Christmas at our bungalow smaller this year. Just our kids, Mark, Diane, and their 2. Diane brought homemade tamales, her mother's recipe, and set them on the table without fanfare. The kids played board games. Laughter echoed off the adobe walls. When Diane passed the gravy, our fingers brushed. No words, just a look, tentative, but real. Later, washing dishes side by side, she said quietly, "I kept the lighter in a drawer. Reminder." I handed her a plate to dry. "Good. Some scars we keep on purpose." Spring brought bluebonnets along the highways, carpeting the hills in purple. The studio celebrated its 10th anniversary with an open house, cakes from the bakery. A string quartet, bolts of fabric unrolled like welcome mats. Mia's gown won a local design award. She dedicated it to me in her speech, voice cracking. I stood in the back, tears slipping, proud in the way only a teacher can be. One evening, Tom and I walked Lady Bird Lake at dusk, the skyline glowing. He carried a small box. Inside, a new wedding band, thinner, etched with tiny stitches. "For the next 25, he said. I slipped it on beside the original. Perfect fit. Life didn't erase the burn marks. They became part of the design. Years have a way of folding themselves like fabric, creases, softening with time and handling. 5 springs after the fire, the studio's back wall is covered in framed photos, Mia's first runway show. The charity's 1000th donated gown. Tom and me under the Vauernewell arch, the scorched lace glowing like a secret. I trace the frames, sometimes when the shop is quiet, the afternoon light slanting through the blinds in dusty bars. My hands are older, no veins more prominent. Knuckles, a little swollen from arthritis. They still know their way around a needle. Diane and I never became the sisters Hallmark sells. But we stitched something sturdier than sentiment. She sold real estate part-time now, mostly to first-time buyers who couldn't afford South Congress prices. She'd text me listings. This one has good light for a sewing table. I'd send back swatches. This silk would look perfect in that bedroom. Small offerings, like passing the salt without being asked. One Tuesday in April. The bell jingled, and in walked Diane with a teenage girl at her side, tall, awkward, clutching a sketchbook to her chest like armor. "This is Sophia," Diane said, voice softer than it used to be. "My niece, from San Antonio. She wants to learn to sew." The girl's eyes darted to the mannequins, the bolts of tulle. The phoenix dress still on display, though the exhibit had long closed. Diane nudged her forward. "Tell Miss Laura what you told me in the car." Sophia's voice barely rose above the hum of the air conditioner. "I want to make my quince dress, but my mom says store-bought is cheaper." She opened the sketchbook. Pages of pencil drawings, gowns with ruffled trains, embroidered bodices, one with a galaxy of tiny mirrors. My breath caught. Talent, raw and hungry. I closed the book gently. Store-bought is cheaper. Handmade is priceless. When can you start? Diane's smile was small, grateful. She lingered by the door while Sophia and I measured muslin. "I'll pick her up at 5, she said, then added, almost shy, "Thank you, Laura." "For what?" "For not making her pay for my mistakes." I waved it off, but the words settled warm in my chest. Sophia became a fixture after school. Summers, her laughter mingling with the apprentices. Diane drove her every Tuesday, waiting in the cafe next door with a book and a decaf latte. Sometimes she'd poke her head in, ask if we needed snacks. The first time she brought homemade alfajors, the girls swooned. I caught her watching Sophia pin a hem, pride softening the sharp edges of her face. Redemption looks different on everyone. On Diane, it looked like quiet service. Tom retired the year I turned 60. His firm threw a party on a rooftop downtown, string lights, craft beer, speeches about bridges he'd designed that would outlast us all. I wore a simple linen dress I'd made the week before, the color of riverstones. When they handed him the plaque, he pulled me up beside him. "None of this without her," he said into the mic, voice thick. "She's the blueprint I keep coming home to." The crowd awed. I kissed his cheek, tasting salt and champagne. We traveled after that slow trips. The kind where you sit on balconies and watch sunsets instead of checking boxes. Santorini at golden hour, the white buildings glowing like fresh muslin. A cottage in Vermont where the leaves turned the hills into patchwork. Each place, I carried a small tin of pins and a notebook. Ideas came unbidden. A Grecian drape, a maple leaf embroidery. Tom sketched beside me, his architect's eye translating landscapes into lines. We'd mail postcards to the studio. "Wish you could see this light." Back home, the charity evolved. We partnered with the women's shelter downtown teaching residents to alter thrift store finds into interview outfits. One graduate, Marisol, stayed on as instructor. She had a scar across her cheek and a laugh that filled rooms. "You gave me a second chance," she told me during a staff meeting, voice fierce. "Now I give it forward." I hired her full-time. The circle widened. Mia opened her own atelier in East Austin, a tiny space-painted sunflower yellow. Her launch collection featured upcycled wedding gowns, vintage lace over modern silhouettes. The centerpiece, a dress made from the remnants of my original wedding gown. The parts too damaged to save, but perfect when layered under sheer organza. She called it Phoenix Reborn. At the show, models walked to a cello cover of At Last. I sat front row, Tom's hand in mine, tears slipping unchecked. Diane sat 2 seats down, clapping until her palms were red. Afterward, Mia hugged me so tight, my ribs creaked. "You taught me fabric has memory," she whispered. I just gave it a new story. Summer brought heat that shimmered off the asphalt. The studio installed ceiling fans that spun lazy circles, pushing warm air around like gossip. I mentored a new crop of apprentices, Sophia, now lead assistant. Her quince dress, long since danced in, and preserved in her mother's closet. One afternoon, a bride came in, sobbing. Her fiancé had called off the wedding 2 weeks out. The dress was paid for, the venue booked. "I don't know what to do with it," she said, gesturing to the garment bag. I unzipped it, a confection of blush tulle and seed pearls. "We'll make it something else," I said. "A gala gown. A prom dress for someone who can't afford one. Fabric doesn't mourn. It transforms." We cut it down that week, Sophia sketching, Marisol pinning, me guiding the scissors. The bride returned a month later for the fitting. Eyes wide as the new silhouette emerged. Off-shoulder, T-length, perfect for dancing without heartbreak. She twirled in the mirror and laughed startled, free. "I thought I'd never wear it again," she said. "Now I can't wait." Diane witnessed the transformation from the doorway, arms full of boba tea for the crew. She didn't say much, but later texted, "Proud doesn't cover it." Fall meant football and Friday night lights. Tom and I hosted tailgates in the driveway, brisket, smoking low and slow, the kids' spouses wrangling toddlers. Diane brought her famous 7-layer dip. Mark manned the grill. The grandchildren called us all by silly names. Grandma Stitch, Uncle Smoke. We let the past stay past. A seam ripper used once and put away. One December evening, snow flurries danced outside the studio windows, a rare Austin treat. I was closing up when Sophia burst in, cheeks pink. "Miss Laura, look." She held up her phone. An email from Parsons School of Design. Acceptance, full scholarship. She squealed. I pulled her into a hug that smelled of pine from the holiday wreaths and her coconut shampoo. Diane waited in the car, engine running. When Sophia ran out to tell her, I watched through the glass. Diane's face lit up, then crumpled into tear-shappy ones. She looked toward the shop, met my eyes, and mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded, throat tight. That night, Tom and I decorated our tree ornaments collected over decades, some made by apprentice hands. The phoenix dress hung in the hallway now, a quiet guardian. I paused beneath it, touching the lace. "Still shining," Tom said, coming up behind me. "Brighter with every story." I answered. The lesson wasn't in the burning. It was in what we chose to do with the ashes.